Hey everyone, this is Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 110 of Album of the Day, in which today's review is going to be a little bit of a different review from what I've done before. For example, the album that I'm reviewing today isn't I don't have a physical copy of. But, just wanted to talk about it just because I just thought it was so interesting that I wanted to tell you guys all about it. And also, another reason why today's review is a different one is because this is my first hip-hop review. And, I never really listened to a lot of hip-hop or rap or anything like that, or reviewed a lot of that kind of stuff, but I just, became so, got so into this artist I'm going to talk about that, I just wanted to go ahead and talk to you guys about it today and the new record they just released. So today's artist is an experimental hip-hop trio from Sacramento, California, who have been around since about 2010 and have been pretty prolific. I mean, they've released over, 6 albums in their just a 6-year career over here. The name of the band that I'm talking about here is Death Grips, and they consist of MC Ride, Zach Hill, and Flatlander. I'm here to talk about their newest album that just came out in May of 2016. The record is called Bottomless Pit, and it's the follow-up to 2015's double album, The Powers That Be, which was just completed by the second half, called Jenny Death. Anyway, I wanted to talk about this album today because, if you're not familiar with Death Grips, well then, I'll tell you a little more about them. They're an experimental hip-hop trio that creates this kind of visceral, kind of bizarre, kind of, disorienting sort of brand of hip-hop, featuring some pretty, featuring some kind of in-your-face sort of, beats and, bass and keyboards, as well as MC Ride's very just animalistic and just very psychotic vocal performances, and some very disturbing and sort of vulgar lyrics. Not like a money-making gang violence kind of thing, but something a little more over the top than that. So Death Grips have been pretty over the top with what they've been doing, but they're not just being loud to be loud. They definitely have a purpose for it. I like that about that, because, I know on paper, a band that sounds like this sounds like maybe a band that I wouldn't want to listen to, but I will admit that I'm totally, I am totally, sort of trying to expand my music taste here to the point where, I'm really maybe a little more open to things here. Bottomless Pit sort of sees them sort of taking everything that they've learned from all their records and kind of challenging themselves to do a little better. Not that some of their previous records weren't great, because they definitely were. I mean, probably my favorite in their discography, as I've gone on to listen to them, would have to be 2012's The Money Store. But they're challenge. But on Bottomless Pit, they're going for some more crisper, much more sort of polished sort of production, while still maintaining that kind of rough around the edges hip hop sound. But it sounds much crisper, as on some of those older recordings, the recording quality was so lo-fi that it kind of tends to blur the mix a little bit, and kind of sounds like maybe just a crazed out mosh pit or something like that I wouldn't live to tell about, or something like that. This album definitely has some stylistic similarities to The Money Store. I mean, the hooks on this record are just undeniably catchy. Just like a lot of the hooks on The Money Store. So Bottomless Pit is sort of similar to that pretty much. Now this record was sort of released like digitally on the internet, and I heard like there's like a vinyl copy of the album that's supposed to be out sometime. Because I want to hopefully I could try to get a physical copy of this album if I can. Can can pretty much. And I know I do know pretty much how I discovered Death Grips was from a reviewer on YouTube that I love to watch, that I really like to watch a lot on YouTube. His name is Anthony Fantano, aka The Needle Drop. He's got a YouTube channel where he reviews records and does vinyl updates and stuff like that. Recently there was like a Needle Drop podcast and yeah, if you have not checked out this guy's videos yet, I definitely implore you to do so. He's got some great videos. He's probably one of the few reviewers on YouTube that I connect to most because our tastes are pretty similar to each other. I know he's a huge Death Grips fan. I mean, every time there's a new Death Grips album coming out, he's pretty pumped up about it. And he's been a fan since Ex-Military came out in 2011, so he's like pretty much reviewed all their records since then. So, Anthony Fantano, if you're watching this video, this is for you. And keep the videos going, man. Man, because you're doing a great job. Anyway, aside from a lot of that, why don't we just talk about the record itself? Now, this album opens with a song called Giving Bad People Good Ideas, and it opens with this really earwormy sort of female vocal, which I actually heard is Clementine Creevy doing that vocal, but I love that hook. I keep giving bad people good ideas, I keep giving bad people good ideas. And then soon after, these just roaring guitars and just pummeling drums come in, like introducing us to kind of the violent aggression that Death Grips has in their sound. MC Rides' vocals come in and they're sort of manipulated and warped a little bit to make them sound really demonic and of course, I wouldn't say the lyrics are necessarily the highlight of this track, but just the sort of intense energy that this song brings to the table, I think is really fantastic. Fantastic, and I love that little guitar riff that sort of pops up here and there. Love that little guitar solo that kind of pops up certain parts. And so it definitely I did listen to the Needle Drop's review on this album, and he did said sounds like something that could have come off of Jenny Death. Now, I haven't really heard much of the Powers That Be, so I can't quite say that, but I have heard a Jenny Death comparison since I have heard that the second half of the Powers That Be, Jenny Death was kind of hardcore punk inspired a little bit, and I'm hearing a little bit of that on this track. And then the very next track, Hothead, has this sort of bubbling keyboard, but then eventually you get into these weird samples and this really intense blah 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 blah. Oh no, blah 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 blah. Oh no, coming out of MC Ride, that I just think sounds really sort of exciting and sort of that's where the intensity really comes in with, MC Rise just, vocal just, getting more and more animalistic, that's what a lot of people I notice with, like, several of these guys' records. Uh, and then, of course, it comes in the kind of this, slow sort of like, groove with this drum pattern as well as MC Ride's sort of you know uh, blending of sort of vocal ranges here. There's some there's some vocals in the background that are kind of they're really kind of low and bassy, and see to pair with MC Ride's own lead vocal. And then eventually, in the middle, there's just some just crazed out guitars, and MC Ride is going like, "Give it up, give 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 it up." It's like definitely a very sort of hypnotic sort of track with a lot of intensity to it that I just really admire about it. And this was like the teaser track for the album. Now I heard there was like an older recording of this song, but this new recording features a more cohesive bass line, which the bass line definitely gives it that much added cohesion, that kind of like that kind of buzzing bass going on that track. But then the very next track, Spikes. Man, this song is catchy as hell. Like this track, I love sort of the references to like skidding going on in the lyrics. Fits in with kind of the crazy sort of, skittering groove of this track, This track, there's like some skittering little percussion and, and just some just some really weird sort of synths on this track, and a little distortion in there, and just one of the catchiest hooks on this whole record, the repeated like spikes, the repeated spikes, yeah, it's just so earwormy, I just could not get that one out of my head. And then the track Warping is like kind of a little more of a a slow, kind of one of the slower, more kind of blurred sort of groovy sort of tracks, and has this kind of weird little like sort of distortion on MC Ride's voice to make it sound really blurry, to fit in with kind of the title Warping. So he's like, "Falling out of tune, my grooves are warping." Like, that little bit of distortion sort of deepens his vocal a little bit in a way that, sounds pretty nice, although this one isn't my favorite on the record. But one of my favorite tracks on this record have to be the song "Eh," which has a more subdued vibe, kind of like the song "Get Got" off of The Money Store, the first track on that album, which had a calmer, quieter sort of vibe, and MC Ride was rapping in more of a regular vocal range, rather when he's just, going nuts on most other cuts, and, just, strips it down to this little beat, and this quirky little, like, little synthesizer, and I love how, on this track, on the lyrics on this track, MC Ride just sounds so over everything. He, you can tell from his vocal that he kind of, sounds like, eventually he's gonna get sick of, doing death grips and, stuff like that. And he's like, he's just like, and he's just like, "Oh, forget death grips," and I'm like, and then next there's the track "Bubbles Buried in This Jungle," which has this just, has this, sort of, catchy little, like, hook, like, yeah, like, wait, no, respect, like, he's sort of just kind of, going nuts on this track, and, the lyrics are kind of similar to, except, on here, MC Rai sounds a lot more just, sort of angry, sort of, and over everything on this track, which, I just love. It's a really nice contrast with the song, with the very previous track, after this kind of calmer track, you go right back into the intensity, over here with this buzzing bass, and sort of, and this beat that just sounds just right in time with that buzzing bass, pretty much. And then the next song on here, Trash, is a track that sort of talks about everybody in this world kind of uploading like uploading trash and stuff like that. So they're referring to like kind of the internet just being full of useless garbage, but yet at the same time, Death Grips are also sort of including themselves in that criticism. I do really like that about this track, and I like how the lyrics don't just reference violence and the lyrical topics on this record aren't just about violence or sexuality, although that was kind of a big part of Death Grip's sort of lyrical sort of content. Pretty much. I forgot to mention, the lyrics on Hothead are pretty vulgar, some kind of gruesome drug references going on in there. Anyway, back to the song Trash. I mentioned the lyrics on this track, but then of course it has strangely this kind of marching band feel. I mean, the synthesizers on this track kind of sound like a big brass section a little bit. And the drums kind of, and the beats strangely have this kind of marching band feel, so it's kind of a, sort of, kind of an odd track, but yet, the stuff on it really works. And then there's the track Houdini, which, again, is one of the catchiest songs on this album, has this hook, like really catchy hook on here of 3, 4, beep, baby. Destroying you, Houdini, baby. Like that hook, just it was bound to get stuck in your head, just like on the song Spikes. Spikes and has this kind of I do really like sort of the groove on this track. The the synthesizers kind of sound like kind of this alarm bell sort of ringing, and plus has one of the best beats on the whole record. Zach Hill has the ability to create some really nice sort of beats when it comes to Death Grips. The following track, BB Poison, I do like what's going on lyrically on this track, but I feel what Death Grips is doing instrumentally sounds kind of like something that they've already done before. I mean, doesn't this song kind of sound like System Blower to you? A little bit, with the popping synthesizers, it kind of sound like a balloon a little bit, which, but, so, like, this one, this one is kind of a little bit of a lull, but then following that is one of my favorite tracks on this thing, 3 Bedrooms in a Good Neighborhood, which has this real catchy hook on it. I'm all up in my glowy hole, S-O, no. And plus also this track has some pretty, violent sort of, lyrics on it, my table through your head, your body through my bed. But yet it's also a very catchy song as well. here as well. But it's also like a very catchy song as well. So that sort of makes it one of the highlights for me on this record. And following that is another track that I wasn't as in love with, the song "Ring a Bell," which I do really like the lyrics on this track. Lyrics sound like kind of ride talking about just in an awful relationship. So it's sort of a terrible relationship with this woman, and he kind of sounds like he feels like that like she owes him and porn and stuff like that. But I feel what Death Grips is doing instrumentally, isn't as strong as some of the other cuts. It feels slightly out of place a little bit. Oh, and I forgot to mention, what I do like, however, about the lyrical content on BB Poison is how on that track, Death Grips sound as if they're sort of, they're sort of, MC Ride sort of accusing people of like, so it's sort of like, it's sort of about, Death Grips sort of leaving their fans in the dark and leaving them waiting for something, including like not showing up to their own shows, and just leaving fans waiting for Jenny Death for a few months after the first part of the Powers That Be first came out. So it's sort of and of course sort of like so they're kind of referring, so there's like a reference in there to like their to like sort of their Twitter name, sort of like their there's like a reference in this track to like their BB Poltergeist name for Twitter, and sort of and MC Red sort of saying, well, I'm in your house and I'm gonna find you, sounded really creepy on there. And there so the very next track after Ring the Bell is the song 808, which sort of it's this track sort of talking about people trying to copy what Death Grips has been doing in order to make their sound fresher. And of course it has some really nice sort of eerie sort of, synthesizers, and plus I just, love that hook, that 808, that 808, bite. Like, just, sounds, just sounds really catchy, and I like how it sort of sounds kind of quiet, with certain parts, but then like the bass sort of rises up and gets pretty intense by that part. And then it closes with the song Bottomless Pit, which is another just visceral sort of like punky sort of banger, which has some some pretty violent lyrics on here. I mean, there's some kind of violent sexuality going on in the lyrics. But yet it really closes out the album, quite nicely, I will admit. So overall, I think that this record, definitely is probably the most well-produced album, probably Death Grips' most well-produced album to date. Sound on here. I like how, they're sticking to those very visceral sort of sounds, but yet they're doing it with some, with some crisper sort of production. I mean, the beats, the bass, the vocals, they all sound, the guitars, they all sound very, they all sound very crisp, pretty much. And also love the lyrics on this record. I think the lyrics, are I think the lyrics on this album are, such as some of Death Grips' best lyrics yet. I mean, there's not a lyrical moment on this album where I'm really like, meh, pretty much, so it kind of makes sense why Death Grips puts in the lyrics and the description of like some of their songs when they, like put it up on YouTube, pretty much. Oh, and like on the song Houdini, I like how in the middle, just MC Ride sort of says frantically, like, tickly, duh, is that a hairstyle? So yeah, I think I'm feeling probably a 9 out of 10 on this record. Really loving it. So that's my review of Death Grips' new album, Bottomless Pit. I'll see you for episode 111.